everybody, welcome to the Untitled Banter Podcast. Usually it's an audio-only thing. Please go subscribe to the What Culture Gaming Podcast. Jules, what's up?
I am just about to say, it is a video podcast today, and we are joined by an extra special guest because the one, the only, Josh Brown is here in the house today.
If I knew which button was the clapping thing, I don't, but...
Well, fortunately, we have hands.
Hey, we've done it. We've made it to the video realm.
Honestly,
for one special occasion.
It's difficult. There's 4 cameras here. We're only using one. I'm not entirely sure which one is actually turned on. That one, maybe, I think.
We're going to go with that one. That one's got a bit of a light on it.
Keep me in line.
So it's fine.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, Untitled Banter Podcast is always where me and Jules take the weekly questions, talking points, whatever's going on in the industry and break everything down. Like I said, please go subscribe to the What Culture Gaming Podcast feed where you can find that. You can also find me and Josh's show, The Wind Up, that goes up every Monday. And there's also the weekly show, the What Culture Gaming Podcast, as normal. But because Jules is up, why not do some stuff in person? So we still have this week's questions and talking points and things from everybody. We'll get through as many of these as we can. I wanted to do a special shout out to Pinky. You know exactly why. For one of the loveliest reasons possible. Thank you very much for everything that you've done. First question, is from Gigantor, who says, who wins in a fight? Daddy Kratos or original Kratos?
Ooh.
OG Kratos.
Oh, well, this is a deeper question, I think. It's not just character versus character. It's love versus hate, isn't it? It is OG Kratos, purely spurned on by vengeance. Daddy Kratos. Love hat.
I feel like old Kratos, like original Kratos, didn't have any restraint. So I feel like on a long enough timeline, a big enough fight, I should clarify that they're not. We're going to be getting into more industry-based questions and things like that. There's a whole swath.
No, don't qualify this. This is a very important question.
It's a really good question.
I'm just saying that in regards to the overall swath of what you can expect from the UBP, there are more things in there. But OG Kratos, I feel, has zero restraint. I feel like you cannot box him in, whereas Daddy Kratos, especially Ragnarok Kratos, will take a minute, will sit back. Even in 2018s when he's taken a minute.
Now, I think that you are missing one key aspect, and that is that Daddy Kratos has something to lose and something to fight for. And when pushed into a corner, that will go even beyond his lack of restraint before, because he was callous and careless. The problem was that young Kratos, he made a lot of mistakes. He made a lot of mistakes when he was fighting the gods. He was constantly duped by people because his anger blinded him. Whereas Daddy Kratos, fixed, focus, understands the job at hand and how to get it done. Plus, let's face it, he's got a lot of cool tools at his disposal. I mean, imagine if you've got screaming young Kratos running towards him with the blades, just going, and he just goes, axe to the head.
You're not wrong,
really cool, and again.
OG Kratos has the Medusa head, though. Like, you can full on...
Oh, wait, so are we saying that he's got access to every single
If you're
relic
invoking the tool rule, then maybe
but the tool rule is that his starting gear was like the Leviathan axe, effectively, wasn't it? So, it's axe versus chains. Which one do you prefer, really?
That's what it comes down to. These days, I prefer the axe. I mean,
Very versatile.
To quote the wrestling lads, popped massively for the return of the chains in the 2018 game.
Yeah,
but
true.
I'm very much an axe man these days.
I think the issue is it's rock in a hard place, right? For me, I go Daddy Kratos beats OG Kratos. But the thing about OG Kratos is you can't kill that guy. He literally clawed his way out of hell, or the equivalent of hell, at least 2 times that I know of. So you kill him, he's coming back. Daddy Kratos in Atreus cannot rest.
That's very true. I'm imagining that he's actually quite an annoyance to the underworld, because it's like you again. Will you piss off, mate? It's like, I'm trying.
Not to make everything about Dragon Ball Z, but you know when Goku always, ends up running Snake Way and he's back again. It's like, God damn it, man, just come on.
They have that bit. Is it? Remember when they remade most of Dragon Ball, and it was like the shorthand version of it? Kai, that was it. And they had the bit where Dragon Way was just like cut down to like a minute and a half, wasn't it? And just kind of like, I'm on the Dragon Way, bye. It's like, okay, that was like nearly an entire arc. Like
when we were in school, though, all that Dragon Way stuff when Goku was dead was like 2 or 3 years of our school time. So it was like you lived a whole life when he was before he was coming back.
You felt like you had gone on that journey with him.
I feel like death barely exists in these contexts. Anyway, let's pick a decision.
I'm going Daddy.
Your Daddy Kratos?
I think I'm going Daddy.
I will go OG Kratos. I think the fury of that man, the unbridled, more immature rage will rest less than Daddy Kratos.
The beauty is, it's going to be like that bit in Godzilla where they just say, let them fight. Like, if I was literally there, I wouldn't want that to happen because OG Kratos did destroy an entire realm.
Yeah,
but if I was watching it on television, if I had to, pay a pay-per-view for that fight. I would. It would be really good. A big spectacle.
It feels like we talk about the AI apocalypse affecting everything. At some point, there'll be a way of having some sort of old school championship fighter. I went into wrestling there, UFC, but you could do Steve Austin now fights Steve Austin from 1998.
Well, I guess
1998 would absolutely destroy him, but
you've got the WWE games that are kind of like the simulation games with their rankings, but I do agree with you. That will be quite an impressive thing.
There's one good use for AI.
There was one more thing that I thought of with Daddy Kratos coming out, in the fact that are we saying that he is he's just the older version of the younger Kratos, right? They're not two separate Kratoses from two different timelines.
No.
Right, so in that case then, he's gone through all the same experiences as him, so he's learned all of his moves. He knows the moves that he's going to do before he's going to do it, whereas the OG Kratos has no idea what he's up against.
This changes things. I was under the assumption that OG Kratos had been pulled in like multiverse sort of. Another thing I was thinking of it. Yeah, very good. And he was fighting like in his prime. He's not learned any of this. He's not realized that vengeance gets him nothing. He's still of the opinion that vengeance actually rules.
He also doesn't fight anyone with an axe, as far as I know. In that entire trilogy.
I don't know if he does. Actually,
he might be completely unequipped. We should definitely move on.
No, one more point. I'm just thinking, how mind blown would original Kratos be, right? If he was fighting his older self, and his older self just turned around and said, like, listen, you're going to get over the death of your wife and your kid, and we have a son now. And it's like, but your wife is also dead. Just so you're gonna have heartbreak.
You will love again, but then she won't be around.
She won't be around. It's like, oh right, maybe that would like calm the raging beast.
Just down for
just be like, wait. So I'm happy. It's like, happy's a.
For a moment, you were okay.
You're a Gen Zer. You're fine. You're fine.
OG Kratos pops in, and old Kratos goes, "Congratulations, Kratos, you got a son."
Frank Fontaine in the corner. That's my boy. That's my boy.
Either way, we would all watch that fight. Next question from Josh Sloan, who says, when revisiting or remembering old games, how much does nostalgia impact your review or rating of that game? E.g., is the game really that good, or do you just remember it very fondly?
Let's face it, we are all nostalgia blind. Like, there are some games out there that I will not go back to because the memory I hold of them is so much better than they could ever be. Like, I personally haven't gone back and played 007 GoldenEye since maybe 2010 at university, like around that area, because it was showing its age a lot then.
Yeah.
And now I'm just kind of like, I prefer to keep it in my mind as being the best first-person shooter ever. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I got that on Switch. I think there are a lot of parts, for GoldenEye specifically, there are a lot of parts.
I don't think you need to qualify if you've got a video game, Scott. You've got everything.
I'm just letting you know, I've bought a couple of video games. But
Brag, all right, I've got a Switch.
Flex. I feel like GoldenEye holds up actually fairly well, as long as you know what you're going for. It's obviously the weird one analog stick thing. In that case, I would defend that GoldenEye holds up pretty well, kind of like a Time Splitters holds up quite well. They're just different styles of first-person shooter. However, I'm going back through the original Resident Evil 4 at the minute, which I still absolutely love. I know!
Watch what you say now, because remember.
I love it, but I forgot how ridiculous that game's script was. I just forgot how much it was like Metal Gear Solid adjacent. Like, they're just full on Leon flirting on with Hunnigan on the radio, and just all the weird quips and all the back and forth stuff, which I know is what made it so lovable. But I remember that game for the action and obviously the everything about the levels and whatever else. And so it's been a long time since 2004. So I'm going back through that now in prep for the remake, and I think that's something where I was like, oh, my nostalgia just blanked out all this, like the bad parts of the script.
So that's a very good example in the sense that I also have downloaded Resident Evil 4 and I was playing it up on the train up here, and I've also done my review, which you can go watch on the channel, of the Resident Evil 4 remake. And the gunplay in Resident Evil 4's remake is so liquid smooth. It is really, really fun, but it got me blinded to how I remembered the original. So I went back and played it, and I was like, oh my God, you are static. You can't move. And all these enemies are just like right in front of you.
You got to stand still to reload as well.
But you realize how slow the enemies were in that game because of that fact. So the entire gameplay tone is so different between them, yet I'm looking at it going like, which do I actually prefer now? Because they're both brilliant in their own right. It's a very strange one.
Distinct. I quite like the way they've drawn that, because we talked about it on the podcast earlier this week, about that whole, one of the strengths of that sort of stick and move approach to it is that you sort of kite enemies around a corner and then have a last stand as you pick off different ones. So I quite like the distinction, but I'm looking forward to getting stuck into the proper Resident Evil.
Oh, it's good, boys.
Yeah.
I cannot wait. I'm so pleased this question in particular came up, because I was playing, when I was off ill last week, I was playing through the Evil Within 1, and it got me thinking about this very question, because in our job, especially, we do top 10 lists, we do editorials, we do podcasts where we're recommending games all the time. It makes me think about some of the games that constantly pop up. How many times have we mentioned Mad Max on a list? How many times have we mentioned Spec Ops: The Line on a list?
Way too
so many.
We're trying to quit. We're trying
times.
to
We
cut
really
back.
are. It's hard stuff to get off of. But the point is, I haven't gone back to play Mad Max in a long time.
Yeah.
That game is almost a decade old. Does it still stand up? Is that recommendation still a recommendation for today? Or is it based on the great time I had playing it 8 years ago? That's something that I'm trying to...
I think that holds up very nicely.
That one probably does, but I went back to the Evil Within to kind of reassess it, to think, I enjoyed this, but it was flawed at the time. How does it play in 2023? Because like you guys were saying, that nostalgia does blind you from some of the issues that from an audience that would experience it fresh now.
True. Well, if you go back and play Gears of War 1, I remember when that came out for the Xbox 360, and I genuinely thought the graphics were never going to get better than this.
Yeah.
Like, I may have also said the same about Final Fantasy VIII when it came out on the PC, which I was very wrong about.
We should do 10 times graphics will never get better than this in video games.
And then brackets, but they did.
I remember the original Mortal Kombat. I was like, well, it looks like real life.
Yeah,
They're
how
photos. How could it possibly be any better?
But I went back and played Gears of War, and I was like, I remembered this being like the revolutionary third-person action shooter game. But nowadays, when I go back and play it, I was like, oh, the level design is really archaic because it sets out very clearly where your firefight sections are going to be. And they realized that really quickly in the action third-person game, that they had to orchestrate these situations like collapsing buildings or rubble would suddenly be in the way for you to take as cover, because it feels so weird to just run up and it's like, why were these boxes here, perfectly chest-high walls so that you could hide behind for this one specific reason?
Yeah.
So going back to it, the sheen was taken off because what was once revolutionary has now just become a trope. And you're like,
Yeah, I think it's always like it always kind of goes back and forward in terms of how much you want to rely on that stuff versus like, because I mean, we just did a whole news video on the fact that Ubisoft are doing a whole bunch of AI stuff going forward. And I want nothing to do with anything that comes out of that whole program. I would rather, because I think as well, we did a whole other thing on how some of the most highly rated games of this year so far are the Resident Evil 4 remake, the Dead Space remake, and Metroid Prime Remastered, you know, approaches to video games that are sort of regarded as old, but are clearly still phenomenal. They're clearly still designed to be finished. They have great mechanics. Like there's that whole thing of like trying to find that balance between nostalgia and just actually stuff that worked.
Yeah.
And that can still keep going.
I guess the question that I've got for you two is, what is the game from your childhood that you just hold up as being like one of the most important? Like, do you have like a game that really like affected you as you were growing up?
My default's definitely Metal Gear Solid.
Okay, so hold on to that. Metal Gear Solid and...
Honestly, probably Metal Gear Solid 2.
Have you guys been back to play them fairly recently?
All the time.
And does it still hold up exactly as well?
I mean, like, obviously it's of its time in terms of the tone of the stuff. Metal Gear Solid 1, obviously it's of the time in terms of the tone of the story, the gruff kind of 90s action hero thing. But I think the stealth mechanics are really solid. I think the inventiveness of the character designs and the plot and everything, like there's enough anime infused into that almost makes it more timeless or makes it more modern. If Metal Gear Solid dropped right now, I think we would all take a step back and be like, this is so cool. This is such a cool IP. This mix of like mechs and cyber ninjas and like there's like gruff hero in the middle and like some of it's self-aware, some of it's playing it really straight.
Yeah.
Like, not that I'm saying it is timeless. There obviously are things that have dated. But I think a lot of it overall is pretty good.
I think it holds up. I do think Metal Gear in particular holds up. That said, there are some other games. I got a PlayStation 1 recently, unearthed it from my parents' house, and I went to CEX, bought a few games for it. And there were a few games from my childhood that, you know, changed my life. I'm talking, you know, Tomb Raider 3. I'm talking Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Oh, amazing.
The Spider-Man 1 PS1 game, and another Star Wars one called like Demolition, which was a multiplayer title.
The Twisted Metal style.
Yeah. That's a really... That game, I swear, like, no one's played.
But it like me and my friends played it all the time, so I booted that up. I bought it on the PlayStation 5 stocks. This is in the classics system, and I thought, let's relive my childhood. Let's see how this holds up. Didn't hold up. Did not hold up. That thing was papered over with paper mache and duct tape, my friend. I played it for 10 minutes, thought, I'm not getting what I want from this. This is not held up in the same way that obviously a Metal Gear stands the test of time. And I think for every Metal Gear, there are 10 games from your childhood that if you revisited now, you'd think, that's better off a memory.
There's something about, because I have this whenever I go back to really old school stuff, where I do think, I love going back to things like Mario 64, or like when I went through all of the Atari 50 collection, where you're going through things that were literally from the late 70s or across the 80s, the formation of what would become genres, or the formation of what would become bankable mechanics. I find it quite easy to tap into what that must have been like, and still finding it impressive that, oh my God, they managed to render something in 3D, or they managed to do this cool, I don't know, sequence of mechanics that feels satisfying. I love that feeling. And so for me, like, I mean, I just bought AKR, which is like this weird game that was kind of half released back in the day, and then Jeff Mendes finished it off now, and it's on Switch. And so for me, like, if there's a core mechanic that was made well, whether it be like timing based or whatever, that'll carry a lot more than the things where we try at the time we were trying to ape like certain filmic traits or cinematic styles or whatever. Those date more the same way movies can date more.
We talked about this actually off camera in the office because I thought that was really interesting, because when I go back to old games, I love appreciating some for what they were at the time, for exactly what you just said there. What mechanics did they bring in? What revolutions did they inspire? How many games copied them, etc., etc. And the fun analyzing from that perspective. But really fun to play it from that perspective. I would personally argue no. Right. I would rather, in a way, watch a video essay on a game that is interesting, and I'd rather go back to play a game that still kind of holds up or still has that mechanic that's still fun today. They're both valuable. None of them should be forgotten, but I just think it's interesting in the way that you want to relive that. Do you want to literally relive it through the action of playing it, or do you want to talk about it? Do you want to think about it?
Yeah, there's almost like a museum or like archival quality to it. Like I like dipping in and doing like a few hours of something, but then it depends how much it holds up. Like I loved Mario 64 even a couple of years ago and went through that for the first time because I finally had an N64. But yeah, all the things in the Atari 50 collection, like you've kind of got a feel of them after maybe half an hour at the most, because they're fundamentally arcade games, but you can sort of dip into them. Versus Resident Evil 4, I am loving playing through that because to me, all that stuff still holds up and it's still really, really fun. And all the castle level and everything, that's still great. Like you could, most of that you could easily just go through again now. So yeah, I guess it's always case by case, but it depends though. It's like, does that core thing feel fresh enough or innovative enough even now? Like if you can revisit it in that way.
And I do think, I'm so sorry, like these questions are so good when you talk about them. It's going to be like 3 questions for the UBB.
Like 50 questions. Cool.
I know. I was going to say, I think it's interesting in regards to the games that we mentioned now. You know, the remakes of Resident Evil 4, the remakes of Dead Space, the remaster of Metroid Prime. Yeah, those games certainly changed things and modernized things, especially in the case of Resi in terms of the quote-unquote tank controls. But the fundamentals of them still hold up. You can still play the original Resident Evil 4, and it still is, in my opinion, maybe yours too, still one of the best games of all time, untouched. It still has that kind of sensibility. I think there are some eternal games that, you know, will be great in the same way that some films are eternal, and they're older, but they feel modern. They were cutting edge.
I think that Resi 4 thing, though, is fascinating because it is one of the best games of all time, but doubly so because of what it was doing for 2004. Like, we're pre-Gears of War, we're pre-stop and pop cover systems. Like, we've barely had over-the-shoulder shooting apart from, like, Operation Winback, and I think Kill Switch was before then. So it's like, there's not that much, and then they sort of, like, perfected it for the time. And then it was held up as like, oh my God, this is a whole other way to interact with enemies and everything else. And when I play it, I'm still in bringing some of that mentality forward and being like, oh my God, it's still mind-blowing, because I'm, like, I'm so aware that it's of that time graphically and everything.
It's because it's supported so well by just a clear and clever aesthetic and sound design. Like, I was going through that game and I was just there, like, the Resident Evil 4 remakes, orchestral stuff that it adds in, and the rich color palette that it adds in, they definitely add a lot to what modern gaming is today, and indeed what horror is in modern gaming as well. But you have something about those crispy, almost like deep fried, like vocal lines and this sort of like nasty sound effects that just sound like wet cabbage being slapped against a fish or something like that. Like it's unique, and that's why it will last forever. It's like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the original film Nosferatu.
Yeah.
Oh God,
like, that is still terrifying to this day. Yeah. One of the first horror films ever made, still terrifying to this day because it's so uncannily odd from a modern audience perspective. And I feel like Resident Evil 4 and other games, like you were saying, they hit that thing of being not perfect by today's standards, but perfect and will last forever as a piece of time.
Yeah,
yes.
Like, I think that's definitely what the thing that was working the most in Metroid Prime Remastered's favor was like, oh, this is such a cool way to explore a level, the first person, the combat, the lock-on targeting, and like that's obviously more the action side of it, but just the puzzle design, the level design. There's so many great things there that are timeless.
I have to say as well, I love it when a remaster actually does what it says it's going to do. Like, it makes an amazing game even better. There are only a very few handful of games that I will say don't go back and play the original. The remaster does it all. Like the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 remake remasters, however you want to slide on that, they are the definitive way to play Tony Hawk's games, in my opinion. At least those first two.
Yeah, unless you have like a weird, twisted, sick love of polygons, like I do.
Or maybe you could put the soundtrack of the original ones over the top.
Yeah, once they finally there was 2 songs missing or something, and then they finally managed to get the rights to them. So I think it is like a now it is a 1-to-1. Yeah, it's the same soundtrack. Yeah,
I think what's interesting as well, or at least I think is interesting. I want to test this theory right now. Is like almost the inverse of what we're saying here. Like these great games will be great forever, but in their context, when Resident Evil 4 came out, and you got so many Resident Evil 4 imitators that were almost immediately slagged off because it's familiar, it's following a trend. I think it's interesting to go back to some of those games that definitely are derivative in a lot of ways, unoriginal, but without that kind of context and being able to separate yourself from it being such an obvious ripoff, you find, no, they still have a lot of merit. Yeah, they were definitely heavily influenced by something, but you shouldn't just write that off necessarily. Like there's some hidden gems within that field there.
There are 2 tangential games to the Resident Evil franchise that I remember Scott and I were talking about at great length, and there was one called Obscure, where you're set at a high school.
We made that.
And the other one was Cold Fear.
Yes. Right, talk about Cold Fear this week.
We talk about those all the time because those exist within that swamp of like, they are Resident Evil imitators. They didn't actually do anything new, or apart from they did add one new element in, but the rest was very formulaic. But my God, those games were good. And they are going to be forgotten. Those are the games that I look back with the nostalgia, going back to the original question, and have the rose-tinted glasses, but want more people to play it, because they too will have that.
Something like Cold Fear is one that in my head, plays like Resident Evil 2 Remake. But I'm sure it does not at all.
No. It's a little bit crispier around the edges.
I'm curious about things like that. Let's get through a few more questions.
Sure.
Just a statement from Nate the Gamer, who says, hot take, Breath of the Wild is a Nintendo version of the Ubisoft formula. Thoughts on this?
Right, okay, so I saw this. It can't be the Ubisoft formula.
Go on.
Well, so we agree that the Ubisoft formula is you take a generic game, you add one element into it, and then you copy-paste it, and if it works, you add that into the big soup, and then you just keep adding a little ingredients.
The comparison I think they're making is the Ubisoft formula being the idea of procedurally unlocking the map based on likely a tower-based mechanic. And that's mostly the thing that binds it together, because the height of it was the Crew 2. That had you unlocking parts of the map based on driving to towers and like docking with them or whatever. Lol. And I think that that's the thing that the direct comparison is, because Breath of the Wild also has towers. But that's kind of, for me, that's the only real comparison.
I think it's reductive, and I think it's more to kind of highlight just how important game design is, because all games, even the most original ones, are made essentially with the same set of tools. They're being influenced by something else. They're working within a framework, and it's how you present things that you can reduce down to, this has a tower, this has a tower, this has a fetch quest, this is all you're doing. In the case of Breath of the Wild versus an Ubisoft title, some of the things you might be doing are the same, perhaps, but it's how that is presented to the player and what the player feels. In an Ubisoft game, we were talking about this just before we came in, actually. In an Ubisoft game, you have everything out on the map. You have your waypoints you're going to. There's not a sense of discovery there. Those activities,
there, you're just ticking it off.
You're just ticking it off. Whereas in Zelda, those activities might be similar, but they're completely transformative, because you as a player have a sense of discovery. There's a sense of mystery. There's a sense of player agency that I don't think you get in Ubisoft titles, where you're railroaded. In anything you do, it feels like 10 of the players will have done, because the marker is there. It's just kind of how you get there, and there's not much variation in that. It's nothing that feels yours. I would even go one step further and say you could argue that Elden Ring similarly follows a Ubisoft-style framework if you reduce it down. But I would
delivers
say...
it in a different way.
But it delivers it in a different way, in something that feels fresh and player-driven, and therefore you wouldn't compare those titles. They feel radically different in terms of quality for me.
No, I'd agree with that. I think it's definitely that idea of authorship being on the player side. Like that idea of, if we all played Ubisoft, if we all played Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and we were like, oh, have you done this yet? Yeah. Have you seen this yet? Yeah, I saw that. That was the third thing it told me to do, so I went and did this. As opposed to Breath of the Wild, maybe you find one of the dragons in the middle of the night somewhere. Or Elden Ring, you realize that you hit a chest and it warped you somewhere completely different. It's not necessarily also a case of just removing the waypoints from Ubisoft games. I think that they have to be designed in a way that trusts the player to stumble onto stuff, and then you need to interconnect everything else so that you slowly see everything, and that is the real magic of it.
Well, the Ubisoft formula is basically like, let's take what works and replicate it again and again and again. Whereas it can't be the same for Breath of the Wild, because this was Nintendo going out on a huge limb of just saying, look, we are going to try something very different for us. And while, like you say, it has the same archetypes of an open world genre, it does deliver them through a lens of adventure, and exploration is at the forefront of it. I never ever felt when playing this game like I was ticking things off. I was actively exploring the map because I wanted to, and I could have at any time turned around and just headed straight for the main goal. That was the only thing that was made clear to you. In all these Ubisoft things, it's always like gated progression. It's like you can only go and do this if you've done these other 3 things over here. Or the worst one where you think you have player freedom, but you'll get to a main story point and it will just say, look, you're not high enough level. You should go back and you've got to grind out that side content.
One of my most hated things in that style of game is if it's a starter enemy or a tiny little enemy, that is, it's level 10 and you're level 4, so it one-shotted you, but it's still doing the same little chip damage animation that like is not meant to kill a player, but because of the level disparity, it automatically kills you off.
I think it's, in terms of like the presentation, in terms of how it doles out its missions, I think Ubisoft titles kind of almost take things away. Like it gives you everything, and then it's like, have you done this? Have you done that? Have you done this? And it kind of feels like you're constantly trying to fill a bucket. Oh yeah, it's kind of trying to fill a bucket. Whereas in The Legend of Zelda's case, for instance, it's like you're filling that bucket, but you're not getting the ingredients that you've been given to go down the shop with. This is a weird analogy, but if I'm trying to make sense here, it's not like you feel like you're missing out. It feels like you're discovering. It feels like you're marking out your entire journey so you can come back and say, Scott, Jules, did you see this thing? It's not because you followed a question mark on a map. It's not because the game necessarily told you to. It's because you felt like you discovered it itself. And how does that affect the experience? I'm going back to Elden Ring again. When you had that moment where you went down the elevator and you found the thing underground.
Amazing. I did that in the first like 5 minutes.
Yeah, an amazing thing. Would that have felt so impactful if the game kind of gave you a little question mark and said, that's in the vicinity?
Yeah, go check out that mysterious area.
Exactly. Scott got there within 5 minutes. It took me about 80 hours to find that thing, you know?
When I went down there, I immediately was like, oh, wow. I was overwhelmed by the sheer size and scope of it that I was like, no, I got to go back up the top now because I feel like
I'm in the wrong area.
This is surely the end boss area. This is like the second level, right? I should go and do all the first things. And what a mistake that was. Because like you say, 80 hours later, I was like, wait a minute, where was that lift going? And I was like, all the way back and go back down. And I was like, oh, this is like just an extra optional thing. What the hell?
Because mine was like, in the first sort of 5-10 minutes, I just like dovetailed away from that guy on the horseback and then found that thing in the woods and descended all the way down. Then randomly match made with a bunch of people who were looking to get into the game and then just had a random dungeon crawling experience with these random people for like an hour or so. And I was just like, I'm just going to go with what this game is serving up. But those were my first sort of couple of hours in Elden Ring, which are massively different to like a lot of other people's.
I think if we're being truthful, the idea of freedom in any video game is just an illusion. The developers have total control, but it's how they hide it. It's how important they make you feel. And we are important. Very, 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 very important, by the way. The gamers are very important. But you know what I mean? It's like how they hide that. It's how well they obfuscate that idea. How much, like you said, they allow you to feel like you're authoring your own experience and not just playing in someone else's toy box. Or to steal another kind of comparison, hitting your mark as an actor. I know a lot of people don't like Naughty Dog or Rockstar games because they feel like they have a very specific scene and you don't have any control as a player. You're an actor. You're playing a role.
Fast enough in the collapsing debris.
Exactly. Hit that mark. Come into a scene that way, and there's a lot of fun to be had by that. But in an open world game, especially, I think it suffers from that.
Man, totally. Like, I think as well, if some random cathedral started collapsing in Elden Ring randomly, or in Breath of the Wild, and you figured it out yourself, you jumped to the side and you sailed out the side as you watched it collapse behind you. That would stick with you a lot more than a dedicated set.
I'll tell you what, I'm doing it again. I'm elongating the question. I think the big difference as well between Zelda specifically and Ubisoft games is how they implement their mechanics. In mechanically speaking, Ubisoft games, apart from maybe Immortals Phoenix Rising, which in itself is maybe a Zelda clone.
It is. That is literally Zelda through an Ubisoft blender.
Totally. You can only interact with the world in the ways you can interact with the world. Press Y to do this. There's not much freedom. Whereas in Zelda, the missions might be basic, the dungeons might be repetitive sometimes, but you're given a set of mechanics and you're given an understanding of how physics work in that world, and then you can improvise whatever you want. It's not just pressing Y or pressing a certain number of buttons in a specific order to get to the end. It's, if I want to improv a bridge here, it's not the prettiest way to solve the puzzle, but I'm allowed to do it. I'm working within the game's framework.
Or if it's a case of like, okay, cool, we do need to get to that shrine to unlock or the tower in this case to unlock this new area of the map. Why don't I just get on this metal slab and fling myself along there? Just like,
it's also like one of the things that made Death Death Stranding incredible? Now let's stick on this point forever, but like the tools that Death Stranding gives you, it's like, well, maybe you want to just put a ladder up the side of the mountain and climb that way, or descend a different way, or build a bridge, or build a stunt ramp and go that way. Restoring authorship on the player side rather than giving you a to-do list and just saying, go do this for 300 hours.
Which is ironic, right? Because Death Stranding is kind of just a to-do list. It's like, deliver this, deliver that, but it's how you get there. It's the freedom in those mechanics to get from one place to another that makes it feel exciting still and dynamic. I think dynamism is the word I would.
I think Kojima knows when to lay off and go, I trust you'll figure this out, but you need to be over here, which is what Breath of the Wild does too. Another statement from Twyla Bell, who says, this is a question, is Scott Taylor becoming a grumpy old man shouting at kids on his porch?
Becoming?
I don't know. You don't shout at many people. I don't think you've ever raised your voice.
Argue with them as to why the old school, why the 2000s were the finest era in gaming history.
I think you're going to make a really good old man. Not that you'll do any shouting, but I'm imagining you on your porch, still play porch. Oh, that's no in your garage.
No, I've never had a porch.
No. Go back to the porch metaphor. He's there in his little rocking chair. He's like, it's a lazy summer afternoon. He's sitting there with his at this point the relic that is known as the the Switch Steam Deck. He's there it's like gathering dust there, and they're like, what's he playing over there? It's like, oh, it's a video game that you use with your hands. What an old loser! And
it's a like, single player game.
Put their chip back into their head
as they have AI dialogue between them because we're too lazy to even talk to each other now.
As I'm sitting there with my single shot rifle shooting VR headsets off people who walk past me, reminding them of the good old times. Question from JP, who says, a full cast for the UBP. Question for all. What is the most obscure video game you currently own? I recently went through some old boxes and they found a copy of the Hobbit game on PlayStation 2. What a treasure. Thanks for all the pods. Well, thank all of you for listening.
Thank you.
God, the old school Hobbit. I never played the old school Hobbit game. It's the one with the what's the name of the artist who did the original animated Lord of the Rings?
Oh, I'm not sure.
That one. They did the design
in that
for
style. Not entirely.
I'm with you.
Reminds me of that. I can't think of that dude's name. People who'll know who I mean. There's a really old, outdated AF version of Lord of the Rings.
In that film, right, when the animated film, the very first one, there's a scene in that where Gandalf is just a massive bellend, right? Because basically, like, he goes to Bilbo and he's just standing there, he's like, all right, geez, why don't you? I say, you look after that ring, you mug. But I tell you what, if it falls into the wrong hands, me and you in a car park and a crowbar, right? I'll ding you. And then he turns away. And he just I think Merry is with him, and he just turns away for a bit, and just turns back to Merry and goes, like that. Just like they animated him, just like scaring him, and he goes like that, and he just walks away, and it's like, what the hell was that? It's like,
did it in the voice booth?
So at that point here, right, you've got animators that probably worked on that because it's about 4 seconds worth of animation, and they say that it's something like 60 cells of animation for every second or something silly like that because of the fluid motion that they've got on. So that person just sat there and just like, yeah, you know what, for no reason, Gandalf's just going to try and spook one of his fellow members of the party for no reason.
That whole thing is over-animated, like you said. It's like those weird Philips CDI Zelda games where everyone's mouth is like a whole separate thing.
It's like, I feel like they had a mocap budget and they had to use it because it was just kind of like, okay, so I want you to just point to where you think Mount Doom is. It's like, no. Point to it. Oh, right, okay.
It's kind of over there. In terms of obscure stuff, I'm going to throw in, I don't know how obscure this is necessarily, but I think my most random game that I still have a physical copy for is ECW Hardcore Revolution.
Wow. From the PlayStation 1?
Yes, from back, because I couldn't find, there was a, I don't know, secondhand shop back in the, I'm going back like 20 years or something. It was back in my initial wrestling phase, because I'm back in now. AEW is pretty good, but back in the day, it was like collecting all the SmackDown games, and I used to have WCW Backstage Assault, and then it was like one of my friends. Back then, everyone was trying to put superstars through tables. It was always like, could you powerbomb someone through a table? Yeah. And the SmackDown games hadn't got that right. They only barely got it right now. But ECW Hardcore Revolution would let you suplex someone if the table was behind them.
It would just catch them, rather than the SmackDown one where you have to do the animation on the table, and then it would just be like claps like that. It's like, wow.
And like me was always trying to convince myself that it looked cool. It didn't. It looked terrible. And they would always float in midair and then fall.
Me and my friends constantly trying to put the table in between, setting up for the 3D, and then watching the table just as it comes, the table just goes, nah, and just like
has to get out of there. Yeah, even like last year's 2K22 still has the ladder, the tables, the ladders like warping out the way and stuff. They're getting there. They've definitely got a hell of a lot further. That would be mine.
Mine would probably be, so obscure games.
Trying to think stuff because for me it was like physical stuff. Like I have very few physical copies of older games now.
Yeah.
It's like Jedi Power Battles, the original Metal Gear Solid, a copy of Sonic on the Mega Drive, and then my ECW game.
I got a lot of really embarrassing PS2 games.
Go on for it.
I know you've got The Sopranos, my friend.
I've got The Sopranos, Road to Respect.
Amazing.
I'm not embarrassed by The
He's on
Sopranos.
Road to Respect.
hey, brap.
He
got me. Sopranos Road to Respect. Yes. I will frame that one. Yeah. That'll be up on the wall.
Yeah.
But I've also got Pop Idol, the video game, which has Simon Cowell on the front.
Why'd you buy that?
I never actually played it. Just have it. Just own it.
Just
got it. Got a jockey game, a horse riding
G1
game.
jockey.
G1 jockey.
Boom.
I'm ethically against it, but I own it for some reason. Don't know why.
I bet you bought it for the same reason that I bought my copy, which is there used to be like a little Japanese game show that had the horses were replaced with random animals and like crazy things, and I thought that game was that, but no, it was an actual real life jockey game, and I was like, this is boring.
I never knew you had the Pop Idol game.
Idol game.
Or the G1 jockey
if
game.
we ever get back into streaming, which you definitely should,
Yeah.
I'll bring it in and I'll make you. I'm not gonna play it, but I'll make you two.
Let's do it.
I can't imagine you have to sing. I can't imagine it's one of those. I imagine it's a button masher, but I don't know what songs are on it. I don't know what do you have to go through the auditions and go to the live shows? Is Simon Cowell involved? He's on the front cover. I guess we'll see.
We'll see.
He's just there gurning it. Like, you've not made it. You haven't got the X Factor.
Jules, what's your most rarest random game?
So it would either be Guitaru Man. Not many people have heard about that, which is fantastic. It's a rhythm action game in a very different sense. In that you've got to a line will appear on the screen and it will come from like left, right, up, down, whatever. And you've got to hold the analog stick in the direction of the line and follow it, kind of like those electric shock games. You used to like get the annoying stick through the thing. I also have that video game, The Annoying Stick, for the PS1. It literally is that carnival game. No, it's that the entire game is that you going through the entire thing using the analog stick.
The board team meeting for that, just we need to get on this.
You had an obsession as a child, didn't you? You're like, I want every version of this game, real life, digital.
But I think I've got 2 copies of Hurdy-Gurdy. Have you played that?
Oh my god, that game was mind-blowing graphically for the time.
It's so cool. It's done in this kind of weird watercolor style thing of like, it looks like a fairy tale book brought to life. And the concept is that you want to become the best herder of the of your land, and you do so by moving these tiny little things called dupes, which are like little chickens, and you put them into pens. But watch out, Josh, because all of a sudden you think to yourself, this is a bit too easy. Watch out, the Gromp is coming along.
Whoa, what's the Gromp?
He's a giant bear who kind of looks like he's being crossed with Scooby-Doo and Ash Millman's hair color. So he's a big pink monster, and he comes along and he's like, I'll eat your dupes, mate.
Like Lotso.
So there we go.
I think we need to call the authorities again.
It's happening again.
It's happening again.
He's referencing the weird colours again.
So there we go. That is the weirdest game that I own. It's
that definitely qualifies. We will end on a question from AJ. A little bit of a spicy question here.
Okay.
Do you think Xbox will be no more in the next console generation, since Game Pass is their golden ticket and they could potentially use that through TV streaming and etc.? I guess is that the direction they go in? UBP. All of us rule.
I think, right, if Microsoft could
Yes.
get themselves on every TV without a console, they would do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah,
like
true.
they don't care about the actual machine itself. They care about like their games and their
They care about the
subscriptions.
girth.
They care about
They
the
want to
girth.
build the girth.
They want to be,
pass.
you know, Batman Forever when Jim Carrey makes the box that, you know, just directly beams into someone's brain. They want to make that. So I think there is a definitely, I don't know if it's imminent, but I think there's definitely a future where Xbox is a branding around, but it's not a machine.
Yes, their ultimate endpoint, their third stage evolution is to just be the app on everyone's TV, on everyone's phone. Excuse me, and pardon me for hitting the table. That's what they want to be doing.
Yeah, no, I have to agree. I think that unless they pivot really hard and they make their next console not about the graphics, but literally it's just a streaming device that allows you to do that, then that may be where they go.
I think.
They market themselves as not being like, we are the powerhouse of gaming in the palm of your hand sort of thing.
Yeah, honestly, because they have that whole contractual stipulation where if you're making a game for the Series X, it has to work on Series S.
Right.
I think that is already them showing their true colors in terms of they're not bothered about making something that would, only work on the high-end system. It's you want to get people in buying the premium console, but you still need to have the wider availability of those titles on the lower stuff.
Then again, I know that the costs of making a console are probably astronomical. Like we have no idea the behind the scenes figures of some of these things, but the research and development, the cost of manufacturing, all that stuff, most of these consoles are loss leaders for the company. They may just do it because of the fact that if they don't do it, it's almost like they're admitting that they lost, even though we just agreed that if they were on every single tablet, TV device, whatever, they are winning. The public image of not having a console out is basically saying, like, we've withdrawn, Sony's taken this one. That's what it looks like.
They seem to be, like, that's almost their positive, because to them, I mean, that whole thing that Phil Spencer said years ago where he was like, oh, we're competing with Google and Amazon, we're not competing with Sony and Nintendo. The idea being that they are this wider service of, this wider, like, wider platform of things. They want that to be the case.
I always read that as being less like them being like, oh, you know, these are the real competitors. Maybe it just was like a big slight to Nintendo and Sony. It's kind of like, you guys are still piddling about in the kiddie pool. We're
not even on our
here on the
radar.
adults table. Like,
that's what I think they want, though. I think they want all exclusives and whatever. Oh, that's all over there, because we're doing this wider, nebulous Ghost in the Shell
that they say before they buy out every single publisher to make sure that they can have exclusives should they so choose.
That was like the whole thing.
It kind of tracks, though, because they're, you know, by making this purchase of Activision for $70 billion or whatever, they're kind of saying, well, we're Disney. We're not like a Sony. We're not a games publisher. We're Xbox, and we're huge. You know, we're this big conglomerate. We don't
cannot deny us. Will be their next tagline.
Oh my God, yeah. For the players over at one side, and then you cannot deny us on the other side.
Or it's just they borrow from the Matrix, and it's just like, we are inevitable. That is it. That is it.
Game Pass is inevitable if they stick with it. But yes, for now, this has been the Untitled Banter Podcast, the UBP, the UBP.
The UB3.
The UB3, the 3BP. I've been Scott Tailford. That's been Jules Gill.
Hi, thank you.
Hi. And also Josh Brown.
Bye, thank you.
Usually we do some sort of two-person outro, but it doesn't matter. It's just Scott Tailford, Josh Brown, Jules Gill. Go find the What Culture Gaming Podcast. Go subscribe for more of these things, and we'll catch you there. Goodbye.
Bye. See ya.